At the will reading, the moment that split the room wasn't the lawyer's voice, it was my mother's laugh. She slid a single dollar across the polished table like she was tipping a waitress. "Some people just don't rise to the standard," she said. My father didn't even glance my way. He just tapped the table, sealing the verdict. Mason got millions. I got $1. And then Victor Boone set a locked wooden box beside my hand. Mason's face twitched fear. Not guilt. But what they didn't know was, I didn't learn I was the overlooked child in one dramatic moment. It happened slowly, like dust settling on furniture, quiet, unnoticed. Until one day, everything is coded. When I was 10, I won a blue ribbon in a school puzzle contest. Nothing grand, but my teacher hugged me, said I had the kind of mind that builds futures. I carried that ribbon home like it was a secret flame I wasn't sure I deserved. Mom didn't ask what it was. She didn't even look. She just set Mason's new soccer trophy on the mantel, polished it with her sleeve, and swept my ribbon into the trash as she walked by. "Let's not clutter the house," she said. The sound of the trash lid closing still echoes sometimes. I swallowed the sting. Because what else does a forgotten kid do? I didn't know it then. But that moment would tattoo itself into the rest of my life. 2 years later, Christmas morning, cinnamon rolls burning in the oven, snow flattening the backyard. Mason opened a gaming console with his name embossed on the tag. My box held socks gray, thin, still with the return sticker. Dad laughed. Practical for once. I laughed, too. That's the joke of being invisible. You learn to perform your own erasure. At 14, Mason was carted between fencing lessons, a summer music academy, and an expensive coding camp. He quit after a week. I was better off helping around the house. Helping meant scrubbing baseboards, cleaning the garage, walking the dog at dawn so Mason could focus on potential. Mom said it with a smile like she was reading a brochure about gifted children. Silence became currency in our home. The more of it I carried, the more they took. When I was 15, the school hosted an award night. I won for an algorithm predicting cafeteria shortages, something small, but clever. The principal handed me a certificate and whispered, "You're going far." My parents didn't show up. Mason had a networking dinner, and apparently ambition required full family attendance. On the walk home, I pressed the certificate against my chest to keep it from wrinkling. It still wrinkled anyway. I didn't realize it. But every one of these small wounds was sketching an outline of who they were, and who I was becoming. A blueprint for the kind of silence that doesn't break. It sharpens. When I turned 17, the air in the Mercer house felt heavier, like even the walls had learned to listen selectively. That was the year my grandfather, Henry Lowell, quietly became the only person who looked at me without measuring me against Mason. He'd say, "If you're free, come by the lake house," as if the invitation were casual. But it felt like stepping into another universe. The lake house smelled of cedar and cold air, and something I can only describe as dignity, the kind you notice only when your own home lacks it. One Saturday, he unlocked a door beneath the stairs and led me into a private archive room. Rows of files, cabinets, financial reports, patterns, truth in its raw form. "Most people chase what shines," he murmured, tapping a spreadsheet. "But the truth usually sits in plain sight. Numbers don't lie. Ava, people do." I didn't know it then. But he was sharpening a blade I'd one day need. By 18, I understood silence too well. On sticky summer nights, I scrubbed the kitchen floor while Dad bragged about Mason's limitless future on speakerphone. I wiped sweat from my forehead and listened to the ceiling fan thrum like it was mocking me. When I mentioned applying out of state, Mom didn't even look up from slicing fruit. "Let's be realistic. Ava, you're steady, not exceptional." That sentence didn't stab. It settled like a weight, placed exactly where they knew it would hurt most. In my early 20s, I worked part-time jobs and sent money home because Mason had business expenses. I didn't question it until I learned his expenses were club tabs and spontaneous luxury weekends. Dad waved it off. He needs room to grow. You understand. Right. Invisible daughters always understand. But the real shift came when I was 22. I sat in the living room under the cold blue light of the TV and heard my parents forging Mason's internship transcript, an internship I had applied for months before. He deserves opportunities, Mom said softly, as if fairness were negotiable. I dug my nails into my palm until half-moon marks bloomed. I didn't realize it then, but something inside me had snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. The way branches break under ice, all the dim hallways, the missed ceremonies, the patched-over achievements, they weren't just memories. They were evidence, and they were waiting for their moment. Leaving the lake house after the will reading felt like stepping out of a freezer. The air outside wasn't colder than the room I'd just left, just more honest. Snow cracked under my boots as I walked to my car. That single dollar still burning in my pocket like a joke I wasn't supposed to laugh at. I started the engine. Headlights cut across the icy road. For a moment, I thought I was finally alone. Then, in my rearview mirror, a pair of headlights appeared. Too close. Too consistent. Mason's SUV. My pulse didn't spike. I'd learned never to give the Mercers that satisfaction, but something in my chest tightened. Mason never followed anyone. He was the sun in our family's solar system. People orbited him, not the other way around. I changed lanes. He changed lanes. I slowed. He slowed. But when I turned into the motel lot, he kept driving. Didn't even tap the brakes. Just disappeared into the blue dusk like he'd never been there at all. Except he had been. And that meant something. Inside the motel room, a cracked heater humming like it resented doing its job. I set the wooden box on the small, round table, opened my laptop, and plugged in the USB. I expected Henry's neat folders, labeled by month or project. Instead, a messy string of files appeared. Video clips, metadata, corrupted timestamps. Henry didn't organize anything like this. Someone else had been inside this drive. I clicked the corrupted clip. The screen flickered with static before revealing a dim hallway, the lake house hallway. A figure moved toward the archive door. Tall, broad-shouldered, an 8-second blur, but familiar enough to freeze me. Mason, or someone shaped exactly like him. I leaned closer, replaying the clip until the image stuttered. My phone buzzed. Victor Boone. Ava, he said, tension tucked under his words. Your mother just called. She wants the will amended. She can't, I said. I told her that. She didn't appreciate it. I let out a dry breath. Elaine Mercer treated boundaries the way Mason treated hobbies, something to abandon when inconvenient. After we hung up, I stared at the paused video. The figure forever reaching for the archive door. Every instinct in me wanted to believe it wasn't Mason, but instincts were luxuries Mercers didn't afford me. By morning, the motel felt colder, like the night had crept into the walls. I walked to Alvarez's diner, the oldest place in town, where the fry oil soaked into the wooden walls and the coffee tasted like burnt honesty. Ruth saw me before I sat down. You look like someone stole your future and handed you coupons, she said, pouring coffee without asking. I almost smiled. Almost when I told her Henry was gone and the will reading had been ugly. Something in her expression tightened. That man loved you, she said. Your parents, she hesitated. Let's just say they changed this town's opinion of the Mercer name. Changed how? She leaned in, wiping her hands on her apron. Henry built things with stone. Richard and Elaine rebuilt them with mirrors. Her words hit like a cold blade. Mirrors. Illusions. Projections. Exactly the tools a family uses to rewrite a legacy and erase an inconvenient daughter. I didn't know it yet. But Ruth had just given me the missing piece of context I needed. Because mirrors don't just distort, they hide. Back at the motel, I closed the diner door behind me and sat on the bed. Laptop already humming like it knew what I was about to do. I opened the next folder on the USB. This one had financial memos supposedly signed by my father. Except the signatures were wrong. Richard Mercer had a precise, almost arrogant pen stroke. These signatures leaned left. Shaky, rushed. Someone had either forged them, or Richard had signed under conditions he didn't want anyone to question later. Either possibility pointed to the same truth: my father was involved in something dirtier than I'd imagined. I opened the metadata timeline. Dates stacked in clean rows until they didn't. Several documents had been accessed the exact day Henry was hospitalized. But Henry didn't have his laptop then, meaning someone used his credentials while he was lying unconscious. Someone inside the family. My phone buzzed. A message from Dad: come home. We need to talk. No greeting. No explanation. Just command delivered like I was still 15 and asking for permission to breathe. I turned the phone off. By noon, I drove to storage unit No. 47. Snow crunched beneath the heavy metal door as I lifted it. The smell hit immediately: cold dust. Cardboard. Stale time. Inside were boxes identical to the ones Henry kept in his archive room. My chest tightened. I opened one at random. Contracts. Transaction receipts. Advisory agreements. And then one document that didn't fit. A contract linking my father to a shell company I'd already seen in the suspicious USB transactions. The dates didn't align with public filings. Someone had rewritten the financial timeline to hide a trail. Mirrors again. Always mirrors. I scanned everything, uploading the files to the encrypted vault Henry created for me. And the more I read, the more I saw it. This wasn't just about money. It was an organized attempt to rewrite Henry's legacy, positioning Richard as the true brains behind the foundation. Erase the old man. Elevate the Mercer name. Outside, wind slammed against the storage door, and for a split second I thought someone was standing there. My heart tightened just once, but when I turned, it was only branches scraping chain link. Still, the unease crawled down my spine. On the way back toward town, I stopped at a grocery store. I needed water. Or normalcy. Anything. I didn't expect Mason. He stood in the frozen aisle, gripping a bag of ice like he didn't remember picking it up. When he noticed me, his expression flickered: guilt, fear, something else. "Ava, hey," he said, voice unsteady. "You followed me yesterday." I replied quietly. He swallowed hard. "I just wanted to check on you. Try again." His jaw shifted. His eyes darted sideways. "Ava, don't make this something it's not." "Mason." Someone accessed Grandpa's files. Someone tall. His breath hitched. "Not me." He said it too fast. Too defensive. But not like a liar, more like someone terrified of being blamed. Again. His shoulders caved slightly. A posture I'd never seen on him before. A posture that looked like someone carrying a weight he didn't put on himself. I walked away first. Not because I believed him, but because the puzzle suddenly had too many edges. And Mason wasn't the only one who could fit that silhouette. Back at the motel, I replayed the 8-second video. Again. And again. Something was wrong. The gait wasn't Mason's. The shoulders were too stiff. Too deliberate. Someone had wanted me to suspect him. Which meant someone knew I had the USB. Someone was already playing a move ahead of me. And for the first time, I understood this wasn't about inheritance. It was about truth that someone was desperate, reckless to bury. The morning of the confrontation, the lake house felt colder than the snow outside. Winter light filtered through the high windows, pale and unforgiving, exposing every flaw in the Mercer family's polished facade. My parents stood near the dining table like they were posing for a portrait: Richard with his hands behind his back. Elaine with her practiced smile stretched thin. Mason lingered behind them. shoulders tense, eyes darting like he wanted to be anywhere but here. Then the door opened. Victor Boone stepped in. No greeting, no condolences. Just a hard, steady purpose in his hands, a folder and a small black device. Elaine's smile twitched. Victor, is that really necessary? He didn't answer her. He placed the device on the table and pressed a button. A soft click. Then, my grandfather's voice filled the room. If this is being played, it means the conditions have been met. Richard's jaw tightened. Elaine froze. Mason flinched visibly. Grandpa's voice continued, steady and tired. I trusted the people closest to me to handle my work with integrity. Some did not. Victor pressed another button. The screen lit up with footage from the lake house study. There was my mother pulling open drawers, tossing aside framed photos, my father examining documents, discussing leverage, discussing how to restructure the narrative before the will goes public. Elaine shot forward. This is taken out of sit, Victor said, calm but sharp enough to cut the air. She sat. Another clip played. The forged signatures, the mismatched dates, the payments routed through shell companies, all tied back to Richard with a trail that was no longer deniable. Richard's face hardened, but his eyes flicked toward the door like he was already weighing his escape routes. Then came the 8-second clip, the hallway, the figure, the archive door. My breath caught. Victor zoomed in. Frame by frame. Not Mason. A stranger. Hired muscle. Broad shoulders. Stiff gait. Unfamiliar stance. Victor opened a document. Payment to this contractor came from a consulting account under your father's name. Mason staggered back like someone had kicked him. You told me it was my fault. He whispered to Richard. For years, you let me believe Richard didn't even look at him. Elaine reached for Mason's arm. But he recoiled. The Mercer wall didn't just crack, it crumbled. Grandpa's voice returned one final time. Ava, by now you've seen what they hoped you would never uncover. The will was not designed to divide. It was designed to reveal. Victor opened the folder and slid the documents toward me. Per Henry Lowell's final directives, all remaining estate holdings, including full control of the Lowell Research Foundation, transfer to Ava Mercer. Richard shot up from his chair. This is absurd. It can be contested. It can, Victor said. But if contested, every asset defaults to the foundation, and a review of past advisory work will be initiated. You know exactly what that means. Silence swept the room. Not my silence this time, theirs. I stepped forward and placed Henry's old key onto the table. The sound was small, but Elaine flinched as if it were a verdict. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. For the first time, they saw me, and they were terrified. When the front door finally shut behind them, the lake house exhaled. It was the first honest sound in hours. I stood alone in the quiet. My family had always been allergic to real quiet. The kind that wasn't punishment, but clarity. The snow outside softened the world, turning the lake into a sheet of silver glass. Inside, the air still held my grandfather's scent cedar, ink, and the faint trace of pipe tobacco he thought no one noticed. I walked back into his study. The room felt different now, like it was waiting for me instead of him. I set the legal documents on the desk and opened the wooden box he'd left me. A sealed envelope, a USB wrapped in cloth, a silver key unlike the first. My hands didn't shake. They used to around my family. Not anymore. I opened the letter. Ava. Truth requires patience. This is where you start, not where you stop. Follow what they tried hardest to bury. The patterns will guide you. Beneath his handwriting was a printed list: dates, amounts, names. Some circled, some crossed out. Every one of them connected to accounts my father claimed didn't exist. A map of secrets, his, not mine. I slid the smaller USB into my laptop. A single encrypted folder appeared. I typed the passcode, Henry once murmured while showing me the archive room. It opened instantly. Inside were files deeper and darker than anything I'd recovered so far. Emails, wire transfers, names I recognized from board meetings, people who built careers on polished reputations, people who assumed the Mercers would always protect them, people who never imagined someone like me would inherit the truth. A chill rippled through me, not fear. Clarity. My family had spent years erasing me, but now they were the ones on the record. And this time, the silence wasn't theirs to control. I closed the laptop, slipped the silver key into my coat pocket, and looked out at the frozen lake still. Bright. Honest, they thought today was the end of the story. But all they'd done was hand me the opening chapter.